should be able to run 4 fronts simultaneously because it has the right people in the right positions with the right authority and the right resources. Your job is to ensure those conditions exist. The execution is someone else's problem. Your daily life is nothing like the movies. The movies give you a mansion in the hills, a compound with fountains and armed men at the gates, a lifestyle that broadcasts what you are to everyone within visual range. You have none of this. You rotate locations every 11 days, on a schedule that is managed by a single person who commits it to memory rather than paper. Your current location is a house in a middle-income neighborhood that looks identical to the 17 houses on either side of it. The car in the driveway is 4 years old and needs an alignment. The man who lives here, as far as the neighbors are concerned, works in agricultural supply and travels frequently. The traveling is real. The agricultural supply is the cover story. You move with 3 men, always. Not more, because more generates the visual signature that draws attention, and attention is the thing you spend your life managing. Not fewer, because fewer is insufficient for the threat profile of a man in your position. 3 men who have been with you for a minimum of 7 years, who have been assessed continuously across that time for the specific loyalty profile that distinguishes men whose commitment is to you personally rather than to whoever holds your position. The distinction matters when the position becomes vulnerable. Men loyal to the position leave when the position is threatened. Men loyal to you are an asset precisely when the position is most at risk. You have a sat phone that routes through 2 relay points before connecting. You have a second phone that you use for one category of communication only, and that is replaced every 6 weeks on a schedule that is itself randomized to prevent pattern analysis. You have a third phone that you have never used for anything other than calling your daughter, and that has never been in the same physical location as either of the first 2. Your daughter is 19. She studies architecture in a city I'm not going to name, in a country that doesn't cooperate with Mexican extradition requests. She knows what you are, in the general way that children of men like you know things, through inference, through the texture of your security arrangements, through the specific quality of conversations that end when certain subjects approach their natural boundary. She has never asked directly. You have never confirmed directly. The space between those 2 positions is where your relationship with her actually lives, which is a space you maintain with care, because it is the closest thing to normal you have, and you will not collapse it by making explicit what both of you understand implicitly. She calls on Sundays. You call back when the operational window allows, which is usually within 4 hours. The conversations are about her studio projects and her friends and the city she's living in, and occasionally about her mother and your other children and the specific ordinary texture of a life being lived at a safe distance from everything you carry. You listen with a quality of attention you give nothing else. Those 30 or 40 minutes are the only period in any week when the threat assessment software that runs continuously in the back of your mind gets quiet enough that you can hear something else. You are aware this is not what a normal father is. You are aware of what a normal father is because you knew yours, and your father was a man who worried about rainfall and market prices, and the health of his plants, and the ordinary anxieties of a man whose life was contained within a geography he understood and a family he could protect by being present. You are a man whose presence would constitute a threat to his family's safety, and so you protect them through absence, which is the specific inversion that this life produces in men who still have something to protect. The February news reaches you before dawn. El Mencho is dead. Tapalpa, Jalisco, military operation. He was wounded during the raid and died while being flown to Mexico City. Center for Strategic and International Studies. You sit with this for a long time, not because of grief. You have no grief for El Mencho, because of the shape of what comes next, which is a question that is already being asked by every significant figure in the Mexican criminal landscape, and whose answer will determine the territorial configuration for the next decade. More than 250 car fires known as cartel roadblocks were set across the 20 states where the cartel is known to operate. 25 members of the National Guard were killed in Jalisco in 6 separate attacks. Vision of humanity. You watch the reports coming through the morning and you read them not as news but as a structural assessment. This is not an organization executing a succession plan. This is an organization reacting. The burning of buses and the roadblocks and the killing of National Guard soldiers. This is the behavior of a decapitated structure discharging its violence in the only direction it knows without a leadership signal to direct it otherwise. The succession question inside CJNG is now the central variable in the Mexican criminal landscape, and you have been preparing for this variable for 2 years because the variable has been visible on the horizon since El Mencho's kidney disease became operationally significant. CJNG is fighting the Nueva Plaza cartel for Guadalajara, La Unión Tepito for Mexico City, Los Viagras and La Familia Michoacana for Michoacán and Guerrero, the Sinaloa cartel in Baja California, Sonora, Ciudad Juárez, Zacatecas and Chiapas, and the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel in Guanajuato. Insight Crime, an organization fighting simultaneously on that many fronts, losing the gravitational center that coordinated the fighting, is an organization whose coherence is now a question rather than a given. Each of those fronts is now being managed by a regional commander who is simultaneously executing the fight and assessing where he stands in the post-Mencho internal architecture. The assessment happening inside CJNG right now is the same assessment that happened inside Sinaloa after El Chapo's arrest, and the same assessment that happens every time a structure built around a single authority loses that authority. You move assets into 3 positions simultaneously. Colima first, because Colima is the port, and the port is the precursor chemical supply chain, and whoever controls the port controls the input side of the fentanyl manufacturing operation. You have been contesting Colima with CJNG for 4 years. The contest is now being prosecuted against an opponent whose attention is divided between 12 other fronts and an internal succession crisis. In Colima, a strategic entry point for precursor chemicals used to synthesize fentanyl, battles involving the CJNG helped drive homicide rates above 100 deaths per 100,000 people for 3 consecutive years. Al Jazeera. You are going to add to that number in the short term to own the port in the long term. This calculation has been made and sits in the part of your mind that holds calculations that are necessary and unspeakable simultaneously. Guanajuato second. The CJNG has been capitalizing on Sinaloa's fragmentation to expand in Guanajuato. CNN. The reversal of that expansion requires you to press Guanajuato, while CJNG is managing the succession question before a new leadership consolidates enough authority to redirect resources to the defense of contested territory. Windows in this business are measured in weeks. You have approximately 6 weeks before CJNG's internal dynamics reach a temporary equilibrium that closes the window. 6 weeks is enough if you move correctly. Zacatecas third, because Zacatecas is where your internal conflict with Los Chapitos is most active, and where the CJNG has been exploiting that conflict with a precision that tells you they had been planning for exactly this opening since the El Mayo arrest. You cannot allow CJNG to consolidate Zacatecas while you are focused on Colima and Guanajuato, 3 fronts simultaneously against a single opponent. This is the operational reality of the current landscape. You communicate the movements through the intermediary chain. By mid-morning, they are executing in 3 states. You are in a middle-income house in a city I'm not going to name, watching reports come in through a phone that will be replaced in the 11 days. The Trump administration designated both Sinaloa and CJNG as foreign terrorist organizations in February 2025. This prompted the Mexican federal government to deploy 10,000 military and National Guard officers and launch Operation Northern Border. Mexico News Daily. You have been managing increased military presence for over a year. The pressure is real. It is also manageable in the way that pressure from a government whose enforcement capacity is partially made of the same material you use to make your operations possible is always partially manageable. The military pressure has a ceiling. The ceiling is defined by the specific depth and distribution of the financial relationships that have been maintained with the institutional architecture for 20 years. The ceiling has not changed because the pressure increased. The ceiling is structural. What has changed is the American dimension. The fentanyl deaths in American cities created a political pressure on American politicians that translated into pressure on Mexican government, that translated into the specific operational temperature you're managing right now. The FPV drone units that CJNG created using tactics learned in the Ukraine war, Al Jazeera, are a response to this pressure. An arms escalation designed to maintain tactical advantage against military assets that are increasingly sophisticated. You have your own drone program. It is smaller and less developed than CJNG's, and closing the gap is a current priority. The rate of change in the operational environment is the thing that consumes your planning capacity above all else. You've been in this business for 25 years, and the pace of change in the last 5 exceeds the pace of change in the previous 20. You think about your grandfather sometimes. He is long dead. He was a man who farmed the same parcel for 50 years and understood the mountains with an intimacy that comes only from that duration of presence in a single place. He knew every rock formation, every watershed, every microclimate that affected his crops. His intelligence was specific and deep and entirely local, and it served him for his whole life. You are a man who has to understand financial flows across 3 continents, drone warfare doctrine developed in a European theater, cryptocurrency mixing protocols, the succession dynamics of a rival criminal organization, the specific political pressures operating in Washington, D.C. that translate into enforcement operations in Zacatecas. The scale of what you have to understand to survive your position is something your grandfather could not have imagined from the ridge above Badiraguato. The ridge is still there. You haven't been back in 11 years. You think about it sometimes in the specific way you think about things that have become inaccessible. Not with longing exactly, with the recognition of distance. The distance between who you were there and who you are here. It is not a distance that can be reversed. It is not a distance you would reverse even if it could be. This is the life you chose, or that chose you, and the distinction between those two things stopped being resolvable somewhere in your 20s and you stopped trying to resolve it. You are 41 years old. You have been inside this system for 25 years. You have the high ground in the specific sense that your grandfather meant. You can see the valleys, and you can see what's moving through them before it arrives. What's moving through them right now is the post-Mencho realignment of the entire Mexican criminal landscape. A vacuum that is simultaneously an opportunity and a danger. An opportunity because vacuums can be filled. A danger because the filling produces the violence, that produces the pressure, that produces the enforcement, that produces the heat, that kills operations regardless of who generated it. You are going to fill what can be filled and hold what must be held, and watch what cannot yet be determined with the patience the mountains taught you, before you were old enough to understand what you were being taught. 3 fronts, 6 weeks, a middle-income house in a city I'm not going to name. Sunday, your daughter calls about a studio project, a residential building she's designing that she says is trying to resolve the relationship between interior space and exterior environment, without making the boundary between them feel like a wall. You listen. You ask about the resolution she's found. She talks for 20 minutes about architecture and light and the specific design problem of a threshold that neither separates nor exposes, but creates something that is its own kind of shelter. You say that sounds exactly right. You mean more than the building. She says, "Thank you, Dad." You sit in the silence after the call ends. You sit in it for approximately 90 seconds before the phone with the satellite routing gets a report from Colima, and the 90 seconds ends and everything that isn't the work recedes to where you keep it, which is somewhere behind the patience, behind the high ground, behind 25 years of a life built on the single lesson the mountains teach everyone, born in their shadow. The man who can wait longest owns the valley. You are still waiting.